On the night before he died, Christ was seated at a table with his 12 apostles in a small room. An initiative for that meal came from Jesus himself. He planned the menu, he presided at the table, and he made a dramatic motion that the Christians would repeat and ritualize for ages and ages and ages afterwards. After giving thanks, Jesus offered them bread, asking them to ingest and to embrace all that it meant, all that it was going to mean. With the disciples' communion with Jesus, they became family. So today, right now, through the words that we heard in the scriptures, and the sacrament we're going to celebrate in a few moments, we become family too. Is there any greater love, any greater gift that the Lord could offer each of us? In the early weeks, months after the resurrection, that early nascent community would gather together after they went to the synagogue and had the celebration there. And then afterwards, on the way, after that was over, they gathered at somebody's house, one of the Christians. And they would recall some of the words, the parables, the miracles of Jesus. For instance, maybe the multiplication of the loaves and the fishes. And 25 or 30 people said, "Oh, I was there. Yeah, there was 3,000 people." Oh, there was more than that. You know that. There was 5,000 people. No, there wasn't. It was 5,000 men, not counting the women and the children. So they would go back and forth like that until they were satisfied that they understood what he was doing. And then somebody would bring up some bread, put it on the table. Somebody else bring up some wine, put it on the table. They'd choose somebody from the community to come up and recite the words that Jesus said at the Last Supper. When they pronounced those words of Jesus, they took the bread and ate the bread and drank some of the wine. Christ identified himself with the bread and the wine. Many of those early days, maybe a couple months, as they would get together and celebrate that Eucharist, when they were saying the words, bringing forth the bread and the wine, Jesus would appear. He'd be right there with them. And, a couple of instances already that happened after the resurrection in the Gospels. So after a while, not knowing when he was going to appear or not, they got a chair. They put an empty chair there in the congregation, the group, so that if Jesus appeared, he'd have his spot. And after a while, as they continued to celebrate, do this primitive Eucharist, and Jesus was present, the revelation, the intuition, he's present. This is the Lord with us when we do these words. And that's what it is today. The Lord is with us when we pronounce those days, when we pronounce those words. We just can't see him. He's here, just as he was with the community. Body and blood. He's here. We just can't see him yet. But one day we will. One day we will. Today, we receive the food for this week's journey. Our journey this week may be joyous. Maybe somebody in the family is going to have a baby. Somebody in the family is announcing their engagement. It could be joyous. It could be terrifying. Maybe somebody's having a biopsy and gets bad news. Journey may be burdensome. Maybe experience loneliness. Somebody just lost a spouse. Maybe experience great loneliness. But we know in our hearts, because of what we do today, the Lord is with us on the journey this week. This great feast goes back to the 12th century. Though the music director back there said it goes to the 13th century. So we have to have a little dialogue after this Mass. But the emphasis in those days was on adoration. Have you ever been to one of the churches, the grand churches in Europe, those great cathedrals? All around the side of the wall, all around the church are altars. And in those days, the emphasis was on adoration. So you'd go to church, and you go to this altar right over here, and as soon as the priest with his back to you raised the host, you get up and you run to the next altar, and wait for the priest, and then the next altar, and the next altar. Because it was felt, the more you looked on the host and prayed and adored it, the more graces you got. But nobody ever went to communion. It was just adoration. And that's when the idea of the processions come in, like we're going to do today, at the end of Mass. It was also the time where the church law came in and told Catholics that you had to go to church, had to receive communion once a year during the Easter season. It's 12 weeks. I had to go once during those 12 weeks, because nobody received. Today, the great emphasis is on coming to receive the Eucharist. That's why you're here. You didn't come to hear this great sermon. You came because Jesus is present, and you're going to receive the Eucharist for the coming journey this week. So many stories associated with the, with the Eucharist. You know, in the time of the knights back in the 12th, 13th century. Anybody here has a rosary around their neck? You understand this story, huh? They would take a little piece of the host and put it in a vial or in something, put the host around their neck when they went into battle, hoping that the Lord would protect them. Another idea of what the Eucharist is all about, to protect us. At the end of the Second World War, a great number of orphans throughout Europe, and they had lost contact with their families because of the war and the battles. So the Allies would gather all these orphan children who were all over the place, bring them together, and try to help them in small little communities with nutritionists and counselors and psychiatrists and on and on and on. And one of the things the kids were always worried about, they wouldn't have enough food to eat because they never had enough food at the end of the war. They were always starving. When they got together in these groups, they were worried they wouldn't have enough food. And at night, they'd wake up and they'd be crying or sobbing, and some even screaming, wondering where food is going to come from tomorrow. So one of the counselors had a brilliant idea. He gave each one of the kids, when they went to bed at night, a roll. Told them to hold on to it till the next morning when they woke up. No more crying, no more sobbing, no more screaming in the middle of the night, because they had food. They knew that they were going to be protected. Isn't this precisely the assurance that Jesus gives us? Satisfy us, protect us, and to help us in our needs. So, a few moments when we take a little bit of bread in our hands, recall at that moment that we are family. We are God's family.